Can Josh Simmons make a move and make a competition of the left tackle position in Kansas City in 2025? Today on Locked On Chiefs.
From the land of the free and the home of the Chiefs, this is the Locked On Chiefs podcast.
Hey, Chiefs Kingdom, welcome back for another episode of Locked On Chiefs, your daily podcast covering the Kansas City Chiefs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Thank you for always making Locked On Chiefs your first listen of the day. Don't forget, we are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube as well. I am Chris Clark from Chiefs Corner. You can go find me over there at Chiefs Corner. Lots of information about the cap and quarterback statistics. Cover a lot of that information over at Chiefs Corner. You can find me there. Today, we are going to have a special show. We're going to be getting you ready for the last day of OTAs. It's getting ready to kick off that the media gets access to, which happens on Thursday. Later in the show, we're going to talk about Kansas versus Missouri. A decision could be coming soon on that. Do we need wide receivers separate in OTAs? Do they get a step ahead going into mandatory minicamp next week? But we're going to start off talking about Josh Simmons, his continued work, his continued progress moving forward. We're going to start off talking about Josh Simmons and whether or not he can make a competition of the left tackle position in 2025 for Kansas City in just a moment. But today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Go check out FanDuel. We really do appreciate them as a sponsor. Josh Simmons. This was a pick that we talked about being possible as early as probably February when we started talking the draft. Was it likely? I don't think that we thought it was likely, but it did end up happening. Kansas City has him as their first-round pick. That's a great situation for them to be in at this point. And I think that that's very exciting that they have a guy that they think is probably going to be their future left tackle, maybe starting as early as 2025. We will see how that competition continues in OTAs and in mandatory minicamp starting next week. When OTAs started, Simmons was not practicing when it came to team periods. He was not doing any of that kind of work. He was just doing individual drills. They did say that he was well ahead of where they expected him to be, which was a great sign and a thought that maybe he could get to a point where he'd be ready for training camp. At this point, I don't know that I really question whether or not he'll be ready for training camp because it sounds like as of last week, he started doing a little bit of the team drills. He stepped in and played left tackle for the Chiefs. Can he continue moving forward in that realm and go that direction and maybe get to a point where he can challenge Jalen Moore for that position in 2025? If he's able to get back from his injury and they feel like he's not going to risk anything in 2025, it would be huge for him to be able to step in and start in Kansas City for Patrick Mahomes and get started going in his career for the Chiefs. I do think that this is going to be something that we definitely need to be paying attention to when OTAs and we start getting information tomorrow. Does he do the same types of things? Does he start doing more team drills in OTAs? That's going to be the next key. Can he continue and go in the right direction with that? The other question when it comes to him is what happens when you get into mandatory minicamp? We've only had scenarios of 2 days that have been available to the media since OTAs have started. Thursday will be day number 3. Then you get 3 in a row next week when mandatory minicamp kicks off, and you should have all the players that haven't been there, Travis Kelce, Trey Smith, those types of guys should be showing up for camp. And you have to wonder, can Simmons continue to put things together? Is he going to get snaps with the team? Is he going to get going in the right direction and continue his health going towards maybe being able to potentially start in 2025 for Kansas City? When they drafted him, Ryan and I talked about this, and we talked about it a lot. We didn't think that there was a possibility that he was going to have a chance to start. We thought that the best case scenario was that he would be the swing tackle in 2025. Right now, I'm not going to say that it's out of the question for him to become a starter in 2025. If he is able to start taking team drills and he can improve on that going into training camp, he's going to get a couple of extra days since he's a rookie at training camp before the veterans get there, and then he's going to start to get acclimated, and we'll see if he can get on the field and start doing work there. He had all the tools while he was at Ohio State. If he's able to get that going and go in the right direction for Kansas City, it would be huge for him to be their starter in 2025. And I understand that there are a lot of people that would be upset if that ends up being the case because Kansas City went out and spent $15 million a year for the next 2 years for Jalen Moore. I understand that. But when you look at this and what this would mean for this roster, You get a left tackle that you think can be your starter for the next 5 to 10 years. If he's able to step into that role and be successful, then you have your guy for the next 10 years. You have Patrick Mahomes' backside taken care of for the foreseeable future, and you can figure out the left guard position, which is the only other position that you have a question about right now on the offensive line. We are still waiting to find out if Trey Smith is going to report to OTAs. I would imagine he probably doesn't. He hasn't been there the other days, but we will see, and we will let you know as soon as we do know that. The big question when it comes to Trey Smith is obviously the contract. We'll see if that ends up getting hammered out. Probably, I would imagine after mandatory mini camps, that will be something that will be front and center for the Chiefs and for Trey Smith. I would imagine that they're going to try to get a deal done. If they don't get it done by July 15th, that's a problem. Then he'll have to play under the tag in 2025. I don't think that that's a direction that either the team or the player want to go, so I do expect that they'll get a deal done. But when you look at Simmons and what this is going to look like for Kansas City, you have potential of having your first-round rookie be your starting left tackle in 2025. You'd be young at that position. You would be young at the left guard position, assuming that Suamataia wins that job, which it sounds like that's the way that the job is leaning right now. They want Suamataia to be that guy. Then you have Creed Humphrey, who's 26 years old. You have Trey Smith, who's around that same age. And you have Jawan Taylor, who's going to be the elder statesman of that line at 28 and probably not in Kansas City in 2026. But at this point, Simmons can be a cornerstone of this offensive line if he's able to step forward and practice and get going in the right direction headed towards training camp. Kansas City has started 5 different left tackles at that position in their 5 different Super Bowls. Eric Fisher, Mike Rimmers, Orlando Brown, Donovan Smith, and then Joe Thuney. That is not sustainable when you're talking about a 7-year period. If you're talking about, 12, 15 years, okay, fine. If you're in 5 Super Bowls in that time frame, 5 tackles might make sense. But 5 and 7 years and you have a different left tackle at every single Super Bowl, that's a problem. They need to get this addressed. Hopefully Josh Simmons can step in and be that guy going forward, and they will have stability at that position. When we get back, we're going to talk about any of the wide receivers and can they separate and show something in OTA. Say goodbye to sticky notes, scribbled plans on the fridge, and overlapping calendar invites. The Skylight Calendar is here to bring clarity to the chaos and help families stay organized without the stress. This sleek digital display syncs with your existing calendars, Google, Apple, Outlook, and many, many more, making it simple to track appointments, practices, dinners, and reminders all in one easy-to-see place. What would it mean if you could eliminate the I don't know excuse from your family's routine? Could assigning everyone their own color finally solve the who does what confusion in your house? How often do plans get missed because they're buried in a digital calendar or not written down at all? Would seeing your whole week clearly on a 15-inch HD screen help you stay focused and less overwhelmed? Right now, Skylight is offering listeners $30 off their 15-inch calendars by going to skylightcal.com/NFL. Go to skylightcal.com/NFL for $30 off your 15-inch calendar. That is skylightcal.com/NFL. One of the most fun positions to talk about on this roster is wide receiver. There are so many things that can play into this position and how it's going to go for Kansas City and what it's going to mean for this roster and how it's going to affect the season in 2025. We talked about it. I talked about it yesterday with Matt. And one of the things is it's a big question of how many they're going to keep. Generally speaking, they've kept 6 wide receivers. So you would figure that you're in a situation where right now you have Hollywood Brown, Rashee Rice, Xavier Worthy, and Jalen Royals are guaranteed roster locks at this point. The only question when it comes to Rashee Rice is his legal troubles. Is that going to cause him to be suspended at the early part of the season? If it does, then you have 3 roster locks and maybe some other guys can come on and take some time or take some snaps on this roster. But at this point, it looks like you have 4 that are pretty much guaranteed. Juju Smith-Schuster, I think, is probably number 5 and would almost be guaranteed, except for he has knee issues that have been hampering him over the past several years. So you have to wonder, is that going to be something that's going to show up during training camp, during preseason, or is it something he's going to be able to continue to play through and be a great number 5 wide receiver? The exciting part about that, though, is if he is the number 5 wide receiver for Kansas City, you've got 4 guys that I think you have to feel pretty good about. I understand Royals is a rookie. He probably won't get a ton of snaps, and he probably won't have a ton of on-field plays, especially early in the season. but it is something that I think he can build into, and he can, help this roster and get that wide receiver position even faster and younger, which is something that they desperately need. If you look at last year, they struggled at times with separation. They struggled being able to move the ball, and that's something that happened because of the wide receiver injuries. You had injuries to Hollywood Brown, who didn't play most of the season. Rashee Rice goes out in, I believe, week 4, and you lose him for the season. Xavier Worthy is a rookie and isn't able to step in and do what you were wanting him to be able to do, which is what I think they're going to try to do with Jalen Royals. Bring him on slow, kind of like they did with Rashee Rice, give him more as the season goes on, and then get him amped up and ready for the playoffs and ready for a Super Bowl run. Worthy was able to do a lot more and did a lot more last year because he got forced into it. But his growth in year 2, I think, is going to be huge. And when you watch the Super Bowl, if you go back and watch the end of the Super Bowl, yes, it's basically over when the play happened, but Mahomes hitting Worthy deep for that touchdown means something, because that is a throw that wasn't being completed early in the season. It's a throw that wasn't even really attempted very often at times in 2024, but I do think it's going to be something that's going to be a staple of this Chiefs offense, and something that they're going to try to build on, trying to use the deep ball, trying to use Xavier Worthy for his speed and doing what he is able to do on the field. I'm really excited to see his growth in 2025. Then you talk about a guy like Jalen Royals, who you don't know what you're going to get, because going to a situation where he's going to have to change to NFL competition, get ready for that. And rookie wide receivers usually don't get a lot of play in Andy Reid's offense because there's so much to learn and there's a ton of nuance. But him being able to be the 4th guy, not somebody that needs to be a starter early in the season, and then having Juju Smith-Schuster, assuming he is able to stay healthy and his knees are okay as he's another year older, that puts Royals in a position where Juju can come in and do the things that you are expecting from a possession type wide receiver. Royals doesn't have to do any of that. Juju gives you the ability to bring Royals on even slower. So if Juju can make the roster, you're in a great position. You're 5 deep at the wide receiver position before you even start looking at who is going to be your kick returner and who's going to be your punt returner and how that's going to play into who's making the roster in 2025. If you end up being 5 deep at that point, then you're trying to look at who's going to be your special teamer, who's going to do that role. Is it going to be a Nico Remihi, who's going to be one of your kick returners or your punt returner? Is it going to be a guy like, as funny as it sounds, a guy like Sky Moore, who was a 2nd-round pick but hasn't really contributed at the wide receiver position? But there are a ton of different guys on this roster that are going to be trying to do anything they can to make a name for themselves. Yeah, you look no further than a guy like Tyquan Thornton, who had a great rookie year in New England, and now he's in Kansas City, and he is a deep threat, and that is something that he could add to this roster. The issue, and this is kind of what I said with Matt yesterday, the issue with a guy like Tyquan Thornton is you're not going to get much special teams from him, so he would probably take the place of a guy like a Juju Smith-Schuster, and that is going to be really the problem when you start talking about these other wide receivers. You have Elijah Badger, you have Jason Brownlee, you have some of these other guys, Justin Ross, Sky Moore, that are going to try to be competing for a position where the reality is that as long as there aren't injuries, you probably already have 4 of the 6 that are going to be on your roster. Another one's probably going to have to be somebody that's a returner. So you really only have room for one more, and they have to beat out a guy like Juju, who is already somebody that Kansas City knows can come in and can play their offense as long as he's healthy. He can help them in 2025. So this is going to be a big question. How does it work out with all these different wide receivers? Are any of them able to separate? Can any of them show anything during OTAs? And more importantly, when you start getting into the mandatory mini camps next week, do any of them make a show of being on the field and doing things? Can Tyquan Thornton get open deep on multiple different occasions and show his speed and show his ability that got him drafted early, 3 years ago? That's the type of thing that's going to make a point and get them to a point where they can compete in training camp when it opens in late July. Really excited about this wide receiver group. I do think that there's a lot of potential here. And the best thing is if you look back to 2024 and you compare it to 2024, you have a situation where you lost so many wide receivers to injury. You had a lot of youth. Now you're in a situation where as long as people stay healthy, which was one of the problems last year. You should be a lot deeper at wide receiver, and you're probably deeper at wide receiver than you've been in years, not just last year, but in years, because Hollywood Brown coming back, Rashee Rice, Xavier Worthy, who is already way ahead of where I think that he probably would have been had he just had a normal rookie season last season. And then you have Jalen Royals and Juju Smith-Schuster. This is a deep group. This is a group that's going to challenge the NFL and challenge DBs. The question is there going to be somebody else that's not listed in those top 5 that's going to step up and say, hey, I deserve a position on this roster? Because if there is, it's likely going to be a issue for Juju Smith-Schuster unless that guy can be a returner. And Nika Remigio probably has a little bit of an advantage at that return position, so that's going to help him be possibly number 6. But that could also determine who makes the roster as a wide receiver for the Chiefs in 2025. When we get back, we're going to talk a little bit about Kansas versus Missouri. Has that decision been made? Right after this. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live. With player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays, fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. Which players are showing up in the biggest moments, and how could tracking their trends help you build your next bet? What would it look like to combine live prop bets mid-game based on how the action unfolds? If you've got a read on who's heating up, why not back it up with the same game parlay? How would $200 in bonus bets add to the excitement if your first $5 bet wins? New to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA and the NFL. This one's going to be interesting because it sounds like Missouri has finally got to a point where they're proving the ability for Kansas City, for the Chiefs to make a decision to stay in Kansas City and have the taxpayers pay up to 50% of the cost of renovating the stadium or building a new stadium. This is huge. Kansas passed something a long time ago, over a year ago, I believe, or at least 9 months ago, giving the Chiefs and the Royals up to 70% in funding with star bonds. The due date on this, and this is why this is such a big deal to talk about right now, the due date on this to figure out was 6/30. That is coming up right around the corner, right after mandatory minicamp gets done. That deadline will start, be getting close and maybe pass. It's a question of whether or not Kansas will be willing to give the Chiefs and the Royals probably an extension on that. I would imagine they will. But at this point, if the Chiefs want to stay in Missouri, they're getting money from the state of Missouri. If they want to go to Kansas and they want a brand new stadium, like it sounds like Clark Hunt has wanted, then they can go to Kansas. It's going to be a big question as to which way they decide. We're still years away from this really being an issue because they can't move until, I believe, 2031. And so you have all the time that would take to build a new stadium, which is going to take a long time to get the land, start the building process, and get another stadium built if they decide to move to Kansas. I don't see them moving in Missouri if they stay in Missouri. I think if they're going to stay in Missouri, they're going to renovate Arrowhead, and the chances are the Royals are trying to move elsewhere. If that happens, Kansas City has huge ability to make some big changes at Arrowhead Stadium and that entire area. That would be something that would be a lot of fun to see what they could build, see how they could renovate that entire area around Arrowhead on top of what they already have, because you would be getting rid of Kauffman Stadium. So that would be something to watch if that is the direction that Kansas City wants to go. There's going to be a lot of questions over the next couple of months, and maybe it's going to come down in the next couple of weeks. Maybe the Chiefs will make a decision. Maybe the Royals will make a decision by the end of June, since that is the original deadline with the state of Kansas. I would imagine, like I said, that Kansas is going to be willing to extend that deadline, considering what this would mean for the state. But it's also possible that that deadline gets here and they haven't accepted it, so they end up staying in Missouri because of that. It's big to see Missouri finally step up and do this. This is something they voted on, and it didn't pass when they voted on it. And now you have a situation where it's passed the House. Now the governor is the only one that is standing in the way of getting this signed, and the Chiefs being able to stay and get 50% of the money for renovations or a new stadium from the state of Missouri. Huge for the team, huge for the state, huge for Kansas and Missouri, and whether or not this is going to be something that is going to work out for either side. I'm not sure which way it's going to go. I live in Kansas. I, I honestly, I don't care which way it goes because I think I love Arrowhead. I love what it brings. I love the history there, and you're not going to be able to get that in a new stadium. So I would love to be able to see Arrowhead stay and just be renovated again. Although I will say I was there. The last time they did a major renovation, I went to the first game that they had. It poured. It was against the Chargers. Believe it was the game that Phillip Rivers actually fumbled a snap at the very end to lose that game. Eric Berry was playing, I believe, in that game as well. But it was an experience, and Arrowhead has always been an experience. So it's really going to be something to see. Does Kansas City, do the Chiefs decide they want to stay in Missouri, or do they decide they want to go to Kansas, get a new stadium, and get a place that has a dome? I know there are a lot of people out there that don't like the thought process of having the Chiefs have a dome because the Chiefs have played in the elements for years. Arrowhead has always been in the elements. You're going to be dealing with that. I understand it, but I understand the other side of it too. Giving Patrick Mahomes when he would be, okay, so it would be 2031 that would happen. So that's 6 years away. He'd basically be 35, 36 years old when he'd be able to start taking snaps in that dome if they move. And then you're in a situation where he has a dome to play in for as long as he continues playing in the NFL. I think that is appealing, but that's not what this decision is going to come down to. It's going to come down to money. It's going to come down to design. And it's going to come down to what does the Clark family want to do? Do they want to stay in the Missouri area with Arrowhead, or do they want to move to Kansas and get a new stadium? Lots of questions, and I'll be very curious to see which way they go and which way they decide. But there is going to be a ton to talk about when this comes up over the next couple of weeks with that deadline looming for Kansas. That's going to be it for us today. There's going to be a ton to talk about in the coming days. We're going to have you covered when we get more information on what happened at OTAs on Thursday. We will have you covered shortly after we get information on that. And then next week, when they get into mandatory minicamps, we're going to be talking about all the different things that go on in mandatory minicamps. We're going to talk about what we see and what we hear about the players that are participating in mandatory minicamps, how they're looking, how the different lineups are going. And we're going to have you all covered because we are 5 days a week on Locked On Chiefs. Let me know if you have any questions or you want to talk about the stadium issue in the comments. Leave them down below. Thank you all for listening today, and we will talk to you tomorrow.